And now we would like to hear from Dr. P. Thiaga Rajan, Honorable Finance Minister and Human Resource Management Minister, Government of Tamil Nadu, who's here with us. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us again.
My distinguished fellow gentleman and lady on the stage, former Deputy Chief Minister of Bihar, Sushil Modi ji, the erudite and extremely powerful orator, the former Finance Minister of Punjab, Mr. Badal, Mrs. Mahajan, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for the chance to be with you here today and to say a few words. Mr. Modi has made several points, but I don't think this is the forum at which I'd like to get into those discussions. I would just say that there's a lot of difference between intent and outcomes, but that's for another day, another time. Today I'd like to just talk about two things. One, since we were given an award for reform, to talk about both the crucial need for reform as well as the complexity in actually getting reform done. And second, to talk a little bit about intent versus execution, which I think I touched on yesterday. So as far as reform is concerned, it is not in human nature actually to desire change. Very few people inherently want change, right? We spend our lives learning a language, a model, a way of life, a system. And it's not inherently in human nature to want to upset the context that you have developed and expose yourself to a different model where you might have to acquire different skills and there might be a different hierarchy and so forth. That's broad psychology. You take that to government, it's even more difficult because processes get entrenched. There's very few formal training programs in most government functions. It's by word of mouth or on-the-job learning. And then you take that to politics and the negative consequences, let's say, of some of the deterioration of the quality of politics, whether it's corruption or insider dealing, then, there's a very unidirectional trend. Once something is broken, very few people are interested in fixing it. So in that sense, reform is complicated and very hard to do. In my case, I would say without the continuous and vociferous support of my Chief Minister, I would not be able to apply many of the things that I have learned in my decades of professional experience to do the job that I do. As important as that is, consistency, continuity, the alignment of all the senior administrative officers, both within finance as well as in other departments, is also critical if you're going to achieve results. And I'm very fortunate that we have such a brilliant set of officers and that our results speak for themselves. We have brought, after 7 years of ever-increasing revenue deficits, in 1 year we have reduced both the revenue and the fiscal deficit by more than 1 percentage point of GSDP, despite having a COVID second wave, third wave, unprecedented reign, first time in office after 10 years out of government. And I think, therefore, the results kind of speak to the intensity of the effort that went in to get these results. But that brings me to my second point. In my understanding, after a mere 18 months, I'm in some ways maybe talking out of turn because the senior ministers on stage here have decades of experience, both as ministers and as politicians, public office. But in my 18 months and I'll limit myself to only the government of Tamil Nadu and the GST Council. I would say that money is not the limiting factor at all. Whatever the shortfall is, whether it's 1 lakh crore, 20,000 crore, 5,000 crore, 10,000 crore. In most cases, I go back to the old kind of Keynes speech during the Second World War, that relative to our predecessors, relative to our ancestors, relative to the societies of old, we are enormously rich and enormously benefited by advances in science and technology, in multiplier effects, in leverage. And so anything that we can actually do, we can afford to do. In other words, it is really a problem of administrative bandwidth, of management and execution capability that is the bottleneck for government performance. And I say that across parties and across governments. In my limited experience, that is certainly true both in Tamil Nadu and in the GST Council. Whatever else we may or may not do well, our capacity to translate intent to exact outcomes is very, very limited. Much more a limiting constraint than money. As I say, after 7 or 8 years of revenue deficits being recorded every year, in 3 years I have committed with the support of the Chief Minister that we'll get to revenue neutral. If we get to revenue neutral, our capital spending under the FRBM Equivalent Act will go up from something in the mid 30,000 crores to a number closer to 1 lakh crores in under 3 years or 4 years. I am not sure we have the execution capability to do that much capital spending in one calendar year or fiscal year. That worries me a lot more. If I take that same issue to the GST Council, whatever may be the limitations and the philosophical differences that I may have with the interpretation of Through Sushil Modi, I say that we both should have the same intent, that is, the execution falls far short of the design. Let's start at the simplest thing. The GST system calls for a council meeting once every 3 months. But if you look at whether that's happening, at least in the last, post-COVID era, that has not happened. You look at the GOMs, the timelines we're given and the function that has happened. I'm a member of 2 GOMs. One that is time-bound, of course the time has been greatly exceeded, on taxation of gaming, horse racing and casinos. And I'm a member of a standing committee or a standing GOM that I would say is vital, which is for systemic reforms. It's the integration of 2 different GOMs, one on computers and systems and one on broader compliance and design. That is a crucial GOM with very many committed, thoughtful members on it. My friend, the Deputy Chief Minister and Finance Minister of Haryana, Mr. Chautala, other members from other states. The problem is the GOM doesn't meet. If it doesn't meet, it's very hard for us to do any real work. And it doesn't meet because the convener hasn't called the meeting. And the convener hasn't called the meeting because the convener's already changed twice in the course. I mean, it's changed once here and in the other committee changed as well. Because in politics, people lose their role in government, and because they lose their role in government, they lose their membership in the GST Council, then they lose their designation into the GOM, and then if they happen to be the convener, then that is the kind of cold freeze of the GOM's functioning. This has happened multiple times, and we have this strange kind of convention that has been adopted, for which I can find no reference anywhere in the documentation, that if you constitute a GOM, the senior most member of that list of people, meaning if you have a chief minister, they should be given as convener. If you have a deputy chief minister, they should be given as convener. And only then you will give other ministers the role of convener. But that is actually the exact opposite of what you want. How many chief ministers have the time in the scope of their broad responsibilities to be convening GOMs for the GST Council? Surely they have much less time than a deputy chief, and the deputy chief minister has less time than a minister. A chief minister has much less time than a deputy chief minister to be running GOM meetings. So it's this strange kind of self-inflicted constraint on the functioning of GOMs through timing. In many cases, we have lost conveners, and it's taken 6 months for the new convener to be named. So I know I'm not trying to be a critic. I'm just trying to say, whatever the philosophical differences, those are secondary to the basic question: can you deliver the intent and can you deliver the design that you have designed yourself or you have set yourself? It's not set by somebody else outside. So I think at a broad level, we should let philosophical questions lie for a different day, till we can first execute whatever we are currently trying to execute in a timely, efficient manner that delivers results. And I make that point because what we are here for today is exactly to honor and reward those people who have shown us that they can execute or they can deliver. So in that sense, whether it's a jury award or a deemed award, it is a great joy for me and a privilege to be here to award people who set the benchmark, that say we can deliver, we will deliver, and if we make a commitment, then we follow through on it. I think that should be the motto for us all. And as Mr. Badal said, those of us who come to public life, our greatest ambition is to improve the lives of citizens, all citizens certainly, but most of all, most important, the poorest, weakest, most in need of help. And therefore, the need for doing things that are socially just, that are financially inclusive, that ensure that we have a more equitable society that creates a kind of harmonious environment is the first job for us all. And whenever we make any decisions in public life, whether that is a political decision, administrative decision, as an opposition member, at any role, as long as we remember that principle that we came here to improve the lives of people, particularly the poorest people, the most in need of support, then I think, of course, the country will be a much better place, irrespective of any other differences. And so I thank you again for this opportunity, and I once again congratulate the many winners of the awards, well-deserved winners, and I will take my leave. Thank you.